The island Hamleto was a place where time stood still, where the air was thick with secrets, and the sea whispered tales to those who listened closely. Sarah, a nurse in her late 30s, had called home for over a decade, but lately she felt suffocated by its familiarity. Her marriage to Michael, an engineer of equal age, had become a comfortable routine, but one that no longer ignited the spark within her. As she strolled through the village on a warm summer evening, the scent of blooming jasmine and filled her lungs. The sky was ablaze with hues of pink and orange, casting a golden glow over the quaint cottages and shops. Sarah's eyes wandered to the local art studio, where Thomas worked his magic on canvas. Rumors swirled about his talent, his reclusiveness, and the enigmatic smile that hinted at 1,000 secrets. Sarah had always been drawn to the mysterious and the unknown. As she watched, Thomas emerged from the studio, his chiseled features illuminated by the fading light. He was even more captivating than she remembered, an artist with a face carved from the finest marble, eyes that seemed to hold a world of pain and passion. Their gazes met for an instant, and Sarah felt the air thicken around her. It was as if time had slowed down, allowing them to share a secret moment. Thomas's eyes never left hers. He didn't smile or wave, but his expression conveyed a deep understanding, as if they shared a language that only the two of them knew. Sarah turned away quickly, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. She couldn't explain the sudden rush of excitement, the sense of recognition that had settled within her. Was it merely curiosity about the enigmatic artist or something more? As she continued on her evening stroll, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, hoping for another glimpse of Thomas. That night, Sarah's restlessness lingered long after Michael had drifted off to sleep. She lay awake, listening to the sound of waves crashing against the shore and wondering about Thomas, his art, his past, and the secrets hidden behind those piercing eyes. In a nearby cottage, James Taylor was keeping vigil over his best friend's property. His own life had been marked by passion and heartache, leaving him wary of entanglements. Yet he couldn't help but feel uneasy whenever Michael's wife came to mind, a sense of unease that had grown more pronounced in recent weeks. As the darkness deepened, James leaned back on his chair, gazing out at the sea with an air of quiet contemplation. His thoughts strayed to Sarah, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that she was no longer content in her marriage. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, not because he harbored any romantic feelings for Sarah himself, but because he knew the risks of getting entangled with someone who didn't share the same sense of commitment. The night air seemed to whisper secrets to James as he sat there, lost in thought. He sensed that something was about to simmer just beneath the surface, a powder keg waiting to be ignited by a single spark, and it wouldn't take much for the delicate balance of relationships to shift irreparably. Sarah's eyes drifted closed, her mind still anchored on Thomas as she succumbed to the weight of sleep. Little did she know that their worlds were about to collide in ways both exhilarating and devastating. The warmth of summer had settled over like a gentle blanket, but Sarah felt a growing sense of restlessness. As she went about her daily routine, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing, a nagging awareness that life had more to offer than the familiar rhythms of her marriage and nursing work. Her gaze kept drifting back to Thomas' art studio, where the windows were thrown open to let in the sea breeze. She caught glimpses of him working on new canvases, his brushstrokes bold and expressive as he brought his visions to life. The rumors about his talent were true. No one had seen anything quite like it before. Sarah found herself wondering what inspired Thomas's art, what drove him to capture the essence of in such vivid strokes. Was it the sea, which seemed to hold secrets only he could hear? Or was it something more personal, a reflection of his own inner world? As she pondered these questions, Sarah felt a strange sense of connection to Thomas. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was the way their eyes had met that evening, or the hint of understanding they'd shared in an instant. Whatever the reason, she knew she needed to see him again. The next day, Sarah made up her mind and pushed open the door to Thomas's studio. He looked up from his canvas, a mixture of surprise and curiosity on his face as he took in her presence. For a moment, They simply regarded each other, Sarah feeling like a bird about to take flight, Thomas observing her with an intensity that left her breathless. "Can I help you?" he asked finally, his voice low and smooth. I came to see your work," Sarah replied, trying to sound casual despite the butterflies in her stomach. "It's incredible." Thomas nodded, returning to his canvas as if dismissing her presence. Yet she sensed a lingering awareness between them, an unspoken understanding that they were both drawn to something more than art. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself visiting Thomas's studio regularly, watching him work and listening as he talked about his inspiration. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing moment, not just a sense of curiosity, but a deepening awareness of each other's presence. Meanwhile, James Taylor watched from afar, his unease growing more pronounced with each new development in Sarah's life. He'd always been wary of commitment, preferring the freedom to roam and explore without attachment. But as he saw Sarah's connection to Thomas deepen, he knew that she was at a crossroads, one where her choices would have far-reaching consequences for all involved. One evening, as James sat on his doorstep, watching the stars twinkle over, he couldn't shake off the feeling of foreboding. The powder keg was indeed primed to explode, and James wondered what role he'd be forced to play in the drama that was unfolding. As for Sarah, she felt herself torn between two worlds, the comfort of her marriage and the thrill of discovery with Thomas. She knew she couldn't deny the connection they shared any longer, but a part of her feared the consequences of giving in to its allure. Little did she know that the choices ahead would test not just her heart, but her very sense of self. The night air whispered secrets in Sarah's ear as she lay awake, her mind torn between two paths. And Thomas, sensing the turmoil within her, gazed out at the sea with a hint of understanding, knowing that their worlds were about to collide in ways both exhilarating and devastating. The summer air was alive with the scent of and blooming flowers as Sarah made her way to Thomas's studio for the third time that week. She'd grown accustomed to the sense of calm that settled over her whenever she stepped into his presence, but it was a feeling she couldn't quite explain. Thomas looked up from his canvas, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and smooth, like the lapping of waves against the shore. "I've been expecting you." Expecting her. She felt a flutter in her chest at the thought. Was it possible that Thomas had sensed her presence before she even arrived? I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. Thomas set down his brush and walked towards her, his movements fluid and deliberate. "You're not an intrusion, Sarah," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "In fact, you're the only one who's truly seen me in weeks." Their gazes held for what felt like an eternity as the air around them seemed to vibrate with tension. Sarah knew she should look away, but her eyes were trapped by Thomas's piercing stare. "What do you mean?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas leaned against the windowsill, his shoulders brushing against hers. "I've been struggling to find my inspiration lately," he admitted, his voice laced with vulnerability. "The sea seems dull and uninspiring, the colors muted and lifeless." Sarah's heart went out to him, sensing the depth of his despair. "But you're a master artist," she said, trying to reassure him. "Your paintings are full of life and passion." Thomas shook his head, his eyes flashing with frustration. "That's just it. I'm not capturing anything real, anything true. It's all just surface level, like the colors on a postcard." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized the connection between them was growing stronger by the minute. She sensed that Thomas was sharing something more than his art with her, something hidden deep within himself. "I think I can help you," she said, feeling a spark of inspiration ignite within herself. "Let me see your paintings." Thomas hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to reveal a series of canvases in various stages of completion. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the vibrant colors and textures, her mind racing with ideas. "This is incredible," she breathed, walking closer to examine each piece more closely. You're pushing boundaries, Thomas, really capturing the essence of. Thomas smiled, his eyes lighting up for the first time that day. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. As they stood there, surrounded by the colors and textures of his art, Sarah felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. It was as if Thomas had opened a door to a new world within her, one where passion and creativity flowed freely. But amidst the excitement, she couldn't shake off the feeling that James Taylor was watching from afar, his unease growing with each passing moment. She knew he was wary of commitment, but what would happen when their worlds collided? The sun dipped below the horizon as Sarah stood in Thomas's studio, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat on the shore. And as she gazed into Thomas's eyes, she knew that their connection had reached a turning point, one where nothing would ever be the same again. We need to talk, Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded, his face inches from hers. I think we do. The air was alive with anticipation as Sarah and Thomas stepped out of his studio into the warm summer evening. The stars were beginning to twinkle above, casting a magical glow over the village of. I'll walk you home, Thomas said, falling into step beside her. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest at the thought of being alone with him, but she couldn't deny the connection that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. They strolled through the quiet streets, their footsteps echoing off the old cottages as they made their way towards Sarah's home. The night air was filled with secrets, and Sarah felt like she was on the verge of uncovering one of Thomas's most closely guarded mysteries. She couldn't help but wonder what lay behind those piercing eyes, what had driven him to create such breathtaking art. As they walked, the conversation flowed easily between them, like a gentle stream meandering through the countryside. They talked about everything and nothing, their words dancing around the unspoken truth that hung in the air, the undeniable attraction that drew them together like magnets. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as Thomas's hand brushed against hers, sending sparks flying through her entire being. It was as if they had both reached a point of no return, where nothing could stop the tidal wave of emotions that threatened to engulf them. When they reached Sarah's front door, Thomas hesitated for a moment before turning to face her. I'll see you tomorrow, he said, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of longing that went beyond words. She knew that their conversation was far from over, that there were secrets and truths yet to be revealed in the shadows of the night. As Thomas turned to leave, Sarah's heart sank into her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She felt trapped between two worlds, the comfort of her marriage and the thrill of discovery with Thomas, unable to shake off the feeling that she was living a lie. James Taylor watched from afar, his unease growing as he witnessed the chemistry between Sarah and Thomas. He knew that their connection was a powder keg waiting to be ignited, and he wondered what role he'd be forced to play in the drama that was unfolding. As the night air whispered secrets in her ear, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that she was about to make a choice that would change her life forever. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees as she stood at the threshold of her home, torn between two paths. I'll be waiting, Thomas said, his eyes never leaving hers as he turned and walked away into the darkness. Sarah closed the door behind her, feeling a sense of foreboding that hung in the air like a challenge. She knew that their worlds were about to collide in ways both exhilarating and devastating, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The next morning, Sarah stood at her kitchen window, watching as Thomas walked towards his studio with a sense of purpose. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized that she had a choice to make, one that would determine the course of her life forever. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, Sarah's mind was racing with questions and doubts. What lay ahead for her and Thomas? Would they find a way to navigate their feelings, or would the secrets and lies tear them apart? The village of seemed quieter than usual as Sarah made her way towards Thomas's studio, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat on the shore. And as she pushed open the door, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Thomas looked up from his canvas, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and smooth. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest as she took in the sense of anticipation that hung in the air. She knew that their conversation was far from over, that there were secrets yet to be revealed, truths yet to be spoken, and she steeled herself for what lay ahead. "I have something to show you," Thomas said, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she followed him into the studio, unsure of what lay in store, but knowing that their world was about to change forever. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Thomas into his studio. The air was thick with anticipation, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that their conversation was about to take a dramatic turn. "I have something to show you," Thomas said again, leading her deeper into the studio. As they walked, Sarah noticed that the canvases on display had changed. Gone were the vibrant colors and textures of his latest works. Instead, she saw a series of stark, black and white images that seemed to whisper secrets in her ear. "What are these?" she asked, feeling a shiver run down her spine as she took in the haunting beauty of the photographs. "They're my early work," Thomas replied, his voice low and introspective. "I was experimenting with different techniques, pushing boundaries and exploring new ways to capture the world around me." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the raw emotion that seemed to seep from every frame. These were not just photographs. They were windows into Thomas's soul. "Why are you showing me these?" she asked, feeling a sense of intimacy wash over her. Thomas shrugged, his shoulders barely moving beneath his worn denim jacket. "I want you to understand me," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "To see the real me, not just the artist." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest as she realized the depth of his vulnerability. This was Thomas's true self, revealed in all its complexity and beauty. As she gazed into his eyes, Sarah knew that their connection had reached a critical point. They were no longer just two people drawn together by curiosity. They were two souls sharing secrets, revealing truths. Thomas stepped closer to her, the distance between them shrinking until it seemed like nothing existed but the two of them and the world around them. "I want you to know me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "To see beyond the art, to understand the pain and passion that drives me." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized what Thomas was asking of her, not just a physical connection, but an emotional one as well. "I want you to know me too," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze burning with intensity. For a moment they stood there, the air thick with anticipation, their hearts pounding in unison like drums on the shore. And then, without another word, Thomas leaned forward and kissed her, his lips brushing against hers with a gentle tenderness that left her breathless. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah knew that their world had changed forever. The secrets, the lies, the whispers in the night, all of it was behind them now, replaced by a connection that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. But as they broke apart for air, Sarah saw something in Thomas's eyes that gave her pause. A glimmer of warning, a hint of danger lurking just beneath the surface. "What is it?" she asked, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Thomas's expression turned guarded, his eyes clouding over like a stormy sea. "Nothing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just my own demons." Sarah felt a pang of concern as she realized that Thomas was still hiding secrets from her, secrets that could potentially tear them apart. As they stood there, the tension between them grew thicker than the summer air. Sarah knew that their world was about to change in ways both exhilarating and devastating. But for now, she just smiled, feeling a sense of hope and longing that seemed to stretch out before her like an endless sea. The air was electric as Sarah and Thomas stood in his studio, their bodies still swaying from the kiss that had left her breathless. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something there that gave her pause, a hint of warning, a glimmer of danger lurking just beneath the surface. "What is it?" she asked, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Thomas's expression turned guarded, his eyes clouding over like a stormy sea. "Nothing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just my own demons." Sarah felt a pang of concern as she realized that Thomas was still hiding secrets from her, secrets that could potentially tear them apart. She knew that their connection was real, but she also knew that it was fragile, like a thread waiting to be snapped. As they stood there, the tension between them grew thicker than the summer air. Sarah knew that their world was about to change in ways both exhilarating and devastating. But for now, she just smiled, feeling a sense of hope and longing that seemed to stretch out before her like an endless sea. But as they broke apart, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that she was living a lie. Her marriage to Michael, though comfortable, had become stale, while her connection with Thomas was like a wildfire burning bright, but also unpredictable and potentially destructive. As she turned to leave, Thomas caught her hand, his fingers closing around hers like a vice. "Stay," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." Sarah hesitated for a moment before nodding. She knew that their conversation was far from over, that there were secrets yet to be revealed, truths yet to be spoken. As they sat down on the couch, Thomas's eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something that could change everything." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized what was coming, that their world was about to collide in ways both exhilarating and devastating. Thomas took a deep breath before continuing. "My past is complicated, Sarah. I've made mistakes, hurt people I care about. But it's not just about me, it's about the choices we make, the paths we take." Sarah listened intently as Thomas revealed the secrets he'd kept hidden for so long. She heard of his struggles with addiction, of the people he'd hurt in his quest for fame and success. And though she felt a pang of sadness, she also felt a sense of understanding, that we all make mistakes, but it's how we learn from them that truly matters. As they talked, the tension between them grew thicker than the summer air. Sarah knew that their connection was real, but she also knew that it was fragile, like a thread waiting to be snapped. But as they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. She realized that their love wasn't about grand gestures or declarations. It was about the quiet moments, the whispered secrets, and the unspoken understanding between them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village of, Sarah knew that she had made her choice. She would follow Thomas into the unknown, no matter where their journey might take them. And as they stood up to face the future together, their hearts pounding in unison like drums on the shore, Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Not for her, not for Thomas, and certainly not for itself.